On a cold November night in rural Montana, the quiet town of Willow Creek was settling into its usual calm. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where neighbors waved from porches and life moved at a slow, steady pace. But that peace was about to break. Strange things were already stirring in the darkness, things that no one in town could explain, and no one would ever forget. The first sign appeared when Jack Miller, a 32-year-old electrician, was driving home from a late shift. Fog hung low across the road like a thick blanket, and the only sound was the steady hum of his truck's engine. As he approached the old Miller farm, he noticed a tall figure standing in the middle of the dirt road. Jack slowed down, rolled down his window, and called out, "Hey! You okay out here?" But the figure didn't answer. It didn't even move. Then, with a motion so smooth it looked unreal, it stepped backward into the darkness. Not a single footstep. Not a single sound. Jack's heart kicked hard in his chest. He floored the gas and didn't stop until he reached home. The next morning, the town buzzed with quiet fear. Several residents had heard strange noises the night before, footsteps wandering between houses, slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet on the pavement. But no one ever found footprints. Emily Carter, a young schoolteacher who had recently moved from Seattle, heard her porch creak around 2 in the morning. She peeked out a window but saw nothing. When she stepped closer, she noticed a long, dark shadow stretching across her living room floor, even though nothing stood outside to cast it. And before her eyes, the shadow slowly faded away. Sheriff Daniels, a steady man who had lived through every kind of trouble the town could offer, held a community meeting to discuss the reports. Jack described the figure he'd seen. Others described the footsteps, the shadows, and the cold stillness that came with them. The sheriff tried to brush it off, probably a traveler passing through, maybe a prank, but everyone could tell he didn't believe a word of what he was saying. On the fourth night, everything changed. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the power went out across Willow Creek. Houses went dark. Porch lights died. Streetlights flickered once and shut down. Jack stepped onto his porch with a flashlight, Emily grabbed her phone light inside her house, and Sheriff Daniels drove toward Main Street to check what was happening. That's when the footsteps started again, but this time, they weren't coming from one direction. They echoed from every corner of town, slow and dragging, as if dozens of heavy bodies were moving through the streets. People peeked from behind curtains. Dogs whimpered and hid. Children cried softly into their blankets. Then, without warning, all the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was so deep it felt unnatural. And then came a scream, from the far north side of town. Sheriff Daniels raced toward the noise and found a group of terrified residents gathered near the Old Town Well, the oldest, most abandoned structure in Willow Creek. That's where they saw it. The same tall, thin figure Jack had encountered, standing perfectly still on the edge of the well. Its arms hung unnaturally long, its head tilted as if the neck barely held it upright, and its face had no features. No eyes, no mouth, no expression. Just smooth, pale skin stretched too tight over a skull-shaped head. But even worse, the figure didn't cast a shadow. Instead, the shadows from the nearby trees and people bent inward toward it, as though being pulled. Sheriff Daniels whispered, "God help us," as the figure slowly turned its blank face toward them. Then it stepped forward, again, without a sound. Before anyone could react, the figure vanished. Completely gone, as though it had never been there at all. From deep inside the well, a faint sound echoed upward, whispering, layered voices speaking in tones no one could understand. The sheriff ordered everyone to go home and locked off the well. But the town didn't sleep that night. And they shouldn't have, because the final night was still coming. Right at midnight, the power went out again. Phones shut off. Radios died. Even backup generators failed. From the thick line of pine trees at the edge of town came the footsteps again, closer, heavier, multiplied. Jack sat on his couch holding a shotgun, breathing shallow, praying silently. The footsteps reached his porch. He heard slow, dragging movement right outside his front door. And then, whispering. Hundreds of voices whispering his name through the wood of the door. Jack, he pressed his hands over his ears, but the whispering only grew louder, soaking into the room like icy fog. Suddenly, the noise stopped. At dawn, Jack opened his door and found no footprints, only long, finger-like scratches carved into the wood. In the days that followed, Sheriff Daniels filed a brief, official report describing an unidentified trespasser, but everyone in Willow Creek knew the truth. The thing that walked their streets wasn't human, wasn't alive, and wasn't gone. Even today, when the power flickers at night or the porch boards creak under invisible weight, the people of Willow Creek freeze and listen.